In medicine and climbing, and even just science in general, there is this parallel that neither are female dominated fields. And so you can walk into a room and feel very different than everyone there. But in that regard, they both feed into each other. And if you can navigate one, you can also kind of navigate the other.
That's Danielle, a trailblazer with the Cairn Project. When Danielle started rock climbing, she saw the need for increasing safe spaces for women and Latinas to be introduced to the sport. It took her a while to find a way into the sport and to feel safe there. She wished that there were women's organizations for friendship and safe climbing. So, as a Ladies Climbing Coalition ambassador, Danielle started the Atlanta chapter, which has grown to hundreds of local women who love climbing. In 2024, Danielle decided to hold an Adventure Fundraiser with the Cairn Project to raise scholarship money that would introduce more girls to climbing. She set her sights on Forbidden Peak in the Washington Cascades in hopes that sharing the adventure with others would make climbing appear less forbidden.
I'm Angie, and this is See Her Outside, brought to you by the Cairn Project and the Summit Scholarship Foundation. We share stories of women, girls, and gender-diverse adventurers to promote belonging and visibility in nature. We hope that this story inspires you to advocate for a more inclusive outdoors.
Women have shaped the sport of climbing since its beginnings as a recreational hobby. In fact, in the early 1900s, when the Seattle Mountaineers Club was forming, almost half the members were women. This was before women had the right to vote. Seattle's first female mayor, Bertha Knight Landis, took office in 1923, and she was a mountaineer. Dr. Cora Smith Eaton was the first female physician licensed to practice in North Dakota. She combined her passion for climbing with the women's suffrage movement and was also the first secretary for the Mountaineers organization. And Alma Wagon was the first female mountain guide at Mount Rainier National Park. She recalled her youth in Minnesota, where she'd climb up on her family's windmills on the property to get a view from up high. She said, "I wanted to get up among the clouds and to feel myself free as the birds in the air, to be able to shout my freedom as loudly as I liked without having someone point to me sadly and say, 'It's not pretty for little girls to climb windmills.'" But even now, over 100 years later, there are still barriers to entry for this growing sport. Here's Danielle.
So I started rock climbing in 2017, 2018, and I had really wanted to try it for years. I wanted a sport that would increase my strength. I was always like a really small person, and I was involved with soccer and tennis and a lot of different sports, but nothing that was really focused on like muscular strength. And I thought it would be super cool to get into climbing. And I also had seen so many National Geographic magazines when I was a kid, and I was very inspired by the mountains, but like no one in my family had ever been climbing, and I didn't have any friends in it. So I had a really hard time finding people to go climb with. I was interested in ropes, and you need a partner to belay you. So I reached out to friends of friends who I didn't know. I said, "Hey, if you know anyone who's interested in climbing, I'd love that connection." And so I was connected with a group of people who were luckily very welcoming. They ended up not climbing for very long, actually, just got me introduced to the sport, and then they kind of dropped off, but it stuck with me. I was happy that I finally got into it in my PhD years, but I had tried since college and was just shocked that it took me so long and really didn't want anyone else to experience that kind of delay in getting into such an amazing sport. So was really passionate about increasing access to climbing right from the beginning.
Did you feel welcomed in the sport right away, or was there a transition period where you kind of had to prove yourself to be there like many of us feel?
So there was one other woman that I climbed with who was very welcoming to me. So I really appreciated having her there. But when she wasn't there, she couldn't always make the climbing sessions. It was a bit more difficult. And then especially when I was outside, I was not into going outside very much or camping. I preferred short outdoor excursions, and especially going out into the woods with someone I didn't know that primarily were men and strangers. I and doing a sport that was very high risk, that was all very intimidating to me. I didn't know the questions to ask to know if people knew what they were doing, were safe. That took me a while to get outside for a little bit, but when I did, I quickly took classes so that I could figure out how to navigate those spaces and decide what was a safe environment for me, not only climbing, but also like being outdoors on your own where you're not sure if you can rely on the other people. I quickly became more self-sufficient in that area. That was one of the hardest things. But one of the best parts of climbing is being outside and enjoying nature. Not having a trustworthy group of people to go with, it can be really hard. That was a huge reason, I think, wanting to make sure that other women didn't have this experience of wanting to get into climbing and feeling like they didn't have a group for them. I also really was looking for some way to give back to the women in my life who had supported me in my journeys thus far in the communities that I've been in. And this was a great way to engage everyone. I can bring new climbers into the space and then also bring old climbers into a community where new people need mentorship and excitement about climbing. So LCC, or Ladies Climbing Coalition, was posting about ambassador positions. Their first ambassadors went out, I think, in 2018, and I applied. Was super excited to be an ambassador for them and started hosting meetups in Atlanta for women and non-binary folks. And then started out really small, having meetups, and then it just exploded. And now there's probably over 400 people who are in our network who come to meetups, both indoor and outdoor, and have like a great community of people that they know are trustworthy and reliable and welcoming that they can climb with.
I know you're passionate about climbing, but I know you also have a passion for your work in medicine.
Yeah, I have a PhD in pharmacology. I did a dual degree program of an MD so I could practice medicine, and a PhD so I could conduct research. And climbing was really great for that because if anyone has done a PhD or has had friends who've done PhDs, it's like a long process where there's lots of hurdles to overcome. And a lot of times you can't see the end of the tunnel. And climbing was really great in the fact that, one, I could have social outlet and hang out with people and get my workout in. But really, too, like there were all these little goals that I could achieve where in my career, it didn't feel like that for many years. My PhD took 5 years, and I felt like for the first 4, I wasn't making any progress. But I could always go back to the gym and say, hey, maybe I climbed a new grade today. Maybe I did a certain type of move that I've never done before. Or I went outside and I did something that was scary to me. I cleaned an anchor for the first time, or I rappelled. And those like little goals really helped me feel better about myself when I was in this long program that didn't have such a clear-cut end.
Did you feel, this might be a funny question, but what did you feel first, that you were a climber or that you were a doctor?
Oh, definitely a climber. I never saw much of a distinction between like person who had been climbing for a long time and a person who had been climbing for a short time. Like everyone was a climber. If you enjoy climbing, whether in the gym or outside, you're a climber. Whereas I felt like for medicine and for science, there was a lot more like structured barriers and structured like milestones that you have to achieve. So my MD PhD program took 9 years total, and it wasn't until after the 7th year that I actually got a title of doctor. And then after the 9th year, I got the second doctorate. So like it took a while. And even now, like when I go in to see my patients, I have to remind myself that I am the doctor. This is my career. Becoming this new role and feeling empowered in it is then a process for me, but it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, the message is that we as women are shown as we're growing up. We don't get to see a ton of rock climbers that look like us or a ton of doctors that look like us. And I am hoping that that's changing more. But for you as a Latina woman, especially, were you able to learn anything from being a female climber that kind of gave you more confidence or, I don't know, identity in medicine?
I feel like that's a huge thing that climbing contributed to my life was giving me this confidence and empowering me just in other areas, especially in medicine. For example, I feel like my decision making is a lot stronger after I have been climbing for several years, because there's so many decisions you make when you're climbing, like, do I want to do this big objective if the weather isn't looking great? Is this, I feel kind of sketched out on this route. Do I want to back down? For decision making in medicine, a lot of times in the beginning, you're taught to question and second guess yourself. And then all of a sudden people are like, stop second guessing and make a decision. And that can be really hard for people to make that transition. But I felt like in climbing, I had to be confident in my decisions, especially if there was like more dangerous or uncertain elements in those situations. I felt like in climbing, there was also an element where I needed to be confident in my decisions around people who I felt like were more experienced than me, and maybe I would have the impression that they would not respect my decisions as much, even though that's probably all internal. And just in my head, I felt like I needed to feel confident and just make my decisions that were best for me, even if other people didn't understand them. For example, sometimes I would climb a route and be like, actually, I know I'm really close to the top, but I'd like to come down. I don't want to do this last piece. This is my gear. If I want to leave a piece in, I'll leave it in. But if you'd like to climb it and be able to get the gear out, that's great too. But for myself, like, I'm not going to push it farther because I don't feel comfortable in the situation. The holds aren't great. The rock quality isn't good. And just being confident that that's the decision I'm making. So that's been really helpful in medicine, and I've seen that play out a lot.
It's an example of in medicine where you can feel those skills that you've learned about risk management coming in.
In medicine, we like to think it's very cut and dry, like this is what we do in this circumstance, and there's a formula, but a lot of times there isn't, and it is very provider specific. There might be times where I see a patient and I want to run a bunch of tests. I want to figure out what their diagnosis is, and I really want to get into the weeds and solve this problem for them. Other colleagues might say, hey, that costs a lot of money. Are you sure you want to do that? And I have to stand my ground and say, hey, I care a lot about how this patient is feeling, and I would like to help them get to a place where they can live their life comfortably, and I'll run those tests for them, and we'll figure out the cost for that patient, but I'm not going to let that dictate all of my decisions. And so there's a lot of differences in opinion, I think, in clinical practice, which is why it depends on, every person you go see as a patient, every doctor you have is a little bit different. And then there's more like acute issues where in a stressful circumstance, like a code, or if a patient quickly has lost a heartbeat or is not breathing, those things, like, decisions have to be made fast, and you can't be dwelling on them. You just have to say, I'm going to order this medication. I'm going to do it now because every second counts. Usually people won't fault you for making decisions that are beneficial to the patient in a time of crisis, but not wavering in your decisions is really important in those.
What do you think that being trained in medicine has taught you about being a better climber?
I'm really passionate about just like bridging all these areas of my life together. And one area that I've looked at a lot is expedition medicine. As physicians, we've learned a lot about how to treat people in the hospital, but pre-hospital care is not as well emphasized because mostly we're not seeing patients in the wilderness or in even their homes and experiencing acute conditions. But I have wanted to take my medicine skills more into the wilderness because there are so many expeditions that are related to climbing or related to even just scientific research that could use the expertise of a physician around to mitigate some of the risk that goes with those expeditions. So worked on getting different certifications for outdoor wilderness first aid and medicine. I've worked with different groups in search and rescue. And I think my medical training has informed me of like knowing when to call for help, when things are like out of control in the wilderness. And this is something that we can't deal with out here. But in general, I've just been really excited by all of the new career opportunities that I've found from the combination of medicine and climbing. And I hope that I can help share that with other people.
I always think about the concept of all of us are better than average at a few things, at least in life, right? And so it's
Mm.
really cool when you can overlap those talents that you have. You're really talented at climbing and in medicine. And when you can find places where those overlap, it makes you really special and extraordinary in the world because maybe there's a lot of people who are good at climbing and a lot of people who are great in medicine, but that overlap is a lot more special and rare.
Yeah, I want to say that that's such a great way to look at it, though, of having like different areas of expertise and different skill sets, and then when you merge them, you do occupy a unique space. I encourage all of my mentees in science to find those areas of overlapping because that is like where there is less people and you can really make a name for yourself. So I just love that you brought that up.
How do you balance the having multiple passions and time management when I'm sure you have a very busy schedule at work? How do you even make time for this other part of your life that's so big?
Everyone always asks me this, and I always say, well, you make time for what's important to you. So I know it's not as easy as that, but really that's what it comes down to. A lot of times for me, like if I have to get up at 5 a.m. to go climbing, I will. And it's easy for me because I really enjoy it. So throughout my PhD, I had a core group of friends that would go to the climbing gym at 6 a.m. so that I could get to lab by 8. And I did it that way because when I was in lab doing experiments and I knew I would go climbing later that evening, I would often rush them and mess them up and then ruin a day's work because I was so excited to go climb later. So I made the plan to go in the morning before any experiments had started, already get my favorite part of the day out of the way so there wouldn't be any competing interests when I was doing experiments. So that's one example. And then two, I think like everyone has a phone, and I hate to say it, but like there's really no excuse for not emailing people and communicating via text message or LinkedIn or whatever, making connections with people. Like this is the most connected we've ever been. And I've made so many amazing connections and had so many awesome life experiences just because I was the one person to read the end of the email where they were offering an opportunity to someone who applied, or I was following up with someone I met with, like in between seeing patients or on my way home, walking home from work, just shooting an email or making a call. Those little things, like they add up and they make your life a lot more meaningful. And I think the last point I would say about time management is that I think it can be really hard when you're in a competitive field to prioritize the things that are important to you and not what everyone else makes important. So I find it really important to invest my time in outreach for climbing and medicine, but that's not everyone's priority and other people don't. And that's okay. People might say that I need to do more teaching for medicine or I need to do more like basic lab science research. Those things are less important to me, but I've excelled in the other areas. So I still am able to make a career for myself and have an enjoyable life. So I would just say like sticking with your passions and not just doing things to check them off the CV list, because you'll have a much more fruitful and meaningful career that way.
Women face barriers in both medicine and climbing. How do you think we can lean into our special talents in order to make a positive impact?
In medicine and climbing, and even just science in general, there is this parallel that neither are female dominated fields. And so you can walk into a room and feel very different than everyone there. But in that regard, they both feed into each other. And if you can navigate one, you can also kind of navigate the other. I think that has been a great thing for me, especially in science, to like own up to the ideas that I have and that may have big impact and not let other people take credit for my ideas or follow up on them. Like, I should be following up on them. I should be taking credit for them. I should speak up and give that idea voice, even if they didn't hear me the first time in a science meeting. Or I used to do this thing where I would like run an idea by one person first, and then I would propose it to the group. And now I realize a lot of times that one person I would propose that scientific idea to would shoot it down for some reason, but then I could bring it to the group or another person and they would love it. And I would have never known that if I had just relied on that kind of one test run at first. So being confident in those ideas has been really helpful in spaces where I don't feel as like the majority. And in climbing, that has played out in the fact that a lot of these communities have been around for a long time in climbing, and they've been mostly by men who have been in climbing spaces for a while and have made a name for themselves. And they also have named a lot of the routes around the country and written the guidebooks and made the organizations that run our climbing communities, which is great. I'm happy that they were able to establish those, but now it's, we have a lot more input from diverse perspectives. And coming in, making Ladies Climbing Coalition group, I was a little bit nervous just because, I didn't know how the community would react, and I wanted to do it in a way that would be the most useful to the community. But after I got that off the ground and got the Ladies Climbing Coalition together, and there was such a positive response, and did a lot of projects with them, which a lot of my counterparts hadn't done, and I wish that they had, because it's such a great organization, but I think it tends to be very intimidating, very like, this is the way we do it, and we don't alter these ways. And so it was a big step for me to join them. And I also hosted some route setting clinics for women where we could put the routes up at the gym and name them and put them up in a way that would be, I guess, like when you climb a route, you may or may not fit every body type. But if you have a variety of setters, you can also incorporate different body types or different ways of thinking. And so I've really wanted to get more women into route setting. There's a great need for that. So having those clinics has been amazing for the climbing community, and people I know from Ladies Climbing Coalition are now route setters at gyms in Atlanta. And I'm excited to just see the diversity of climbs there. I think one last thing I'll say too with that is that it's not just about like a female or male dominated space. It's also can be about underrepresented groups, like financially or socioeconomically or ethnically or racially. And for that, I think there's still a lot of work to be done too. Climbing is such a high cost sport. And yeah, when you go outside, eventually you get all the gear and you don't have to pay for things anymore. But that barrier to getting outside and paying for gear is really high. Paying for a gym membership is really high too. And so I've been trying to get those barriers lowered as well. We make all of our meetups free if people they're not totally free, but they are discounted for the gym. And then our outdoor trips are minimal cost to people, which is unlike a lot of other climbing organizations. And then bringing more people into the first ascent space has been really exciting. So once you put a first ascent up, you can name it and you're the first person to climb it ever. Your name is in the guidebook and it's a really special feeling. And these are only for outdoor climbs. And so I had a great opportunity to put up my own first ascent that was just like a really special thing for me because I had dreamed about doing that for many years. And I remember when I went to go climb at this place in Alabama for the first time, I was way out of my element. I was one of the only females there. Everyone was trad climbing. I was like, I don't even know what trad climbing is. Like, this is crazy. And then going back there and putting up a route was really awesome. And I wanted other people to get that experience as well. So I helped the SCC introduce climbing to a group of underrepresented kids to bouldering in Atlanta, and they got to put up their first ascent and name them, and they're on Mountain Project, and they can go back and tell their families, hey, I was the first person to ever climb and name this route, and I put a grade on it, and anyone who comes back is able to say that so-and-so climbed this, or my dad climbed this. And I think that's really special. And they're all kids of color as well. Even though it was like intimidating to be someone working on first ascents and working in that space, as that's like not a minority or female dominated space at all. It's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, and just seeing everyone get so excited about it has been really cool. So
what's coming up for me is a beautiful relationship with mentorship, but both being a mentor and a mentee, because I personally think that a great mentorship relationship means that the mentor gets just as much reward out of the partnership as the mentee, or possibly more. How do you think we can better serve as both great mentors and also be a great mentee?
what makes a great mentor is someone who cares more about their mentee than their own professional development. I've had mentors who have an agenda, and this is what they want to get done. This is what they want the mentee to do, even if it's not what they want, and it's just doesn't really go anywhere. When you listen to your mentee and what they're interested in, you can really come up with some awesome ideas. I also think that mentors, this is a little bit above and beyond than a typical mentor, but I think a really great mentor is going to push a mentee to figure out how to enact change in their community, something bigger than themselves in whatever space that is. If that's like developing materials for patients to be able to understand their diseases more, or if it's to develop materials for people to get into climbing and make that less intimidating, or lower the cost, develop a scholarship for other people to help people get into climbing, whatever it is. Like, I think a mentor that's really good is going to help you think outside of the box and how you can have a large impact. And I think that's really rare to find. And then along those lines, I think a mentee that is really great is someone who, one, shows up regularly, because being a mentee can feel very passive, and you're just receiving information from this mentor, and they're supposed to take you along and everything will be great and dandy. But I've had a lot of mentees in all sorts of fields drop off, not engage with the things that we've discussed, for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're just busy, or that's not what they're interested in. But then we don't really get much out of that relationship. And mentees who follow up and are engaged and ask questions of their mentor will get more out of it, because the mentor will know what you want to do. And then I also agree that like finding that intersection between your interests is critical for developing a really unique career. I've had mentees that are interested in science and want to expand that into space medicine and also research, or art and medicine. And you're like, wow, I've never really thought about those parallels, but let's brainstorm. Like, have you thought about designing the graphics for medical textbooks? Would that be a career path that's interesting to you? It would be interesting to study how the human body responds to being at really high altitudes, etc. So just like those kind of areas have been really cool. And honestly, that's the mentors I had that were the most useful were the ones who were excited about the intersection of my ideas rather than just pushing me along a path. I got into a lot of my PhD work being interested in medicinal plants and global health, and finding ways to increase access to care and access to medicines in a way that is inclusive and well-rounded in how we view health. And I've, traveled all over the world trying to talk to people about this and have mentorship. And really it's not the ones who are like, you need to go to med school and follow this set path and everything will work out. And if you happen to make great discoveries on the side, that's an added bonus. Those people are fine, but that wasn't the most meaningful. The most meaningful were the ones who are like, yeah, what you are talking about is really different and really cool. You should connect with this person and make your own path. It might be a little bit hard or uncertain, but why not try it? And it might lead you to some great opportunities.
The gender gap in rock climbing is smaller than in many other sports. And many women have been the first overall human to complete some of the most difficult climbs in the world. Climbing is more about technique than it is about sheer strength. And women have a knack for focusing on finessing their technique rather than using strength as a crutch for hard moves. And this is super cool. Scientific studies have found that there's less of a gender gap in sports that used to be part of our ancestors' survival and therefore evolution. So think about climbing trees. Rock climbing is one of those sports. Still, like Danielle's already explained, rock climbing takes money, time, and social connections that not everybody has. Because of that, Danielle decided to turn her next adventure into a fundraiser to help others experience the joy of climbing.
So I'm really excited to do this trip to Forbidden Peak in Washington. It will be my first true alpine experience. I've done some intro to mountaineering courses, some ice climbing, classes in self-rescue. This will be the culmination of everything together. Forbidden Peak is one of the 50 classic climbs in the US, and I haven't done one of those either, so I'm excited for that. The idea of it being named Forbidden is really just cool to me, to climb something that's called Forbidden, especially when, if you had asked me a couple years ago if I would be in the mountains climbing, I would have been like, no way, that's basically forbidden for me. Like, I wouldn't be able to do that, or like, who would let me? I'm not experienced enough, etc. But being able to like build on all the knowledge and experience I've had over the few years and accomplish something like this would be really cool. So I'm hoping that with this we can raise some funds for the Cairn Project and help other people like not be as intimidated with climbing or being outside, and break down those barriers, especially financially for people. I would be ecstatic if someone was able to experience, the mountains for the first time, or doing some kind of amazing adventure that's been on their bucket list, because I was able to help get the word out and raise some money through this project.
In August 2024, Danielle was ready to start her Forbidden Peak attempt. But wildfires had closed the trails needed to access the climb, leaving it forbidden for a bit longer. Danielle found a similar climb in both caliber and objective, the nearby Mount Stuart, which she summited as an alternative adventure. In the process of training and climbing, Danielle raised over $1,000 for climbing scholarships for female and gender-expansive youth to experience their own climbing adventure. Climbing has shaped Danielle into an incredible medical resident, mentor, community leader, and volunteer for the Cairn Project. I'm so inspired to see how the skills that she honed through medicine and climbing overlap to create a blend of talents that's unique to Danielle and her story. So I wonder, what are two elements of your life that you excel in? How do they overlap? How can they be used to create a better future for women in the outdoors? Remember Alma Wagon, the Mount Rainier guide? She once said, "Up on top of the world, one learns what people really are. There's no better fun in the world to know the wonderful exhilaration of viewing range on range of mountain peaks that rise in tinted ranks above the sky." Danielle has joined a powerful group of women who have shaped and are still shaping the history and culture of climbing. We can't wait to see what happens next.
Become a trailblazer through the Cairn Project. Trailblazers design an adventure fundraiser that crowdfunds scholarships to help girls, women, and gender-diverse adventurers experience the transformative power of time in the wilderness. Go to www.cairnproject.org to learn more. 2. You can spread the word about the Summit Scholarship Foundation to help us advance gender equity on and off the mountain. Check it out at www.summitscholarship.org. And 3, you can share this episode of the See Her Outside podcast with a friend. Every share, 5-star review, or comment helps us share stories to get more girls outside. See Her Outside is hosted by me, Angie Marie, and edited by Allison Castonguay. Until next time, go get outside.